All right, let's unpack a classic financial dilemma. Is it better to buy a home, or should you just keep renting? Welcome to this explainer on the real math behind real estate. And trust me, the numbers we're about to run, they're going to totally challenge everything you thought you knew about the quote-unquote American dream. For decades, we've been fed a very specific narrative. You know the one. It usually starts with this exact question. Is renting really just throwing your money away? Well, today we're taking all the emotion out of it. We're firing up a 20-year data-driven financial time machine to see what actually happens to your wealth.
To do this, let's meet Ryan and Steve. They're both 32 years old, they've got identical finances, making an $80,000 salary with exactly 80 grand sitting in the bank. But their personalities? Total opposites. Ryan craves stability. He wants to put down roots and own a permanent home. Steve, on the other hand, is all about flexibility. The mere thought of a 30-year commitment gives him a cold sweat.
So Ryan decides to buy. He finds a nice $350,000 house and puts 20% down. But once you factor in those pesky closing costs, suddenly, before he's even unpacked a single box, Ryan has completely drained his entire $80,000 savings. Meanwhile, Steve keeps his 80 grand safely tucked away in the bank and just rents a comparable home in the exact same neighborhood.
Now, let's look at their month-to-month cash flow. When you tally up Ryan's mortgage, property taxes, insurance, and a realistic maintenance budget, his true monthly housing cost comes out to $2,653. Steve's rent is exactly $2 grand flat. That leaves Steve with an extra $653 every single month, which he strictly funnels straight into the stock market right alongside his original savings.
And this perfectly illustrates the grand illusion of early home ownership. People love to tell Steve he's throwing his money away, right? But if you break down Ryan's massive monthly payment, out of all that cash, a measly $230 is actually building equity. The remaining $2,400, it literally vanishes into thin air, paying for interest, taxes, and maintenance. Those are unrecoverable sunk costs, basically the true price of admission for owning the place.
But, as we all know, real estate is a long game. So how does this actually play out over time? Let's hit fast forward on our 20-year timeline and see who really builds the most wealth. The guy slowly chipping away at home equity, or the guy aggressively compounding his cash in the market?
Okay, so by year 3, Ryan learns a rather painful lesson. When your name is on the deed, every single weird noise in the basement comes with a price tag. He wakes up one morning to a busted water heater, spends 4 panicked hours watching YouTube tutorials, and ultimately has to shell out a few $100 for a professional plumber. Steve? He blissfully ignores maintenance. For him, a broken water heater is literally just a quick text to his landlord.
Let's do a quick net worth check at this 3-year mark. Assuming normal, steady home appreciation for Ryan and a standard 10% market return for Steve, we are looking at a dead heat. Ryan holds about $123,000 in home equity, but Steve's liquid investment portfolio has grown to $130,000. So at this early stage, the renter is actually slightly ahead.
The invisible force making this possible for Steve is opportunity cost. Since Steve didn't trap his original 80 grand inside a down payment, that money is aggressively compounding in the background day after day. Honestly, any fair comparison between buying and renting always has to account for what your down payment could have earned if you just kept it invested.
Let's jump ahead to year 10. Now both of our guys are facing a brand new antagonist, creeping compounding costs. Because obviously neither the housing market nor the rental market just stays frozen in time.
While the principal and interest on Ryan's mortgage have stayed perfectly locked in, his taxes and insurance have definitely crept up. But Steve? Steve has a much bigger problem on his hands. His landlord is a huge fan of compound growth, bumping his rent by about 3% every single year. By year 10, Steve is paying nearly $2,700 a month. That sweet monthly cash flow advantage he started out with, it is completely gone.
At 42 years old, Ryan can walk around his living room knowing he confidently owns about half the bricks in his house, sitting on up to $278,000 in equity. But thanks to a solid decade of strict, unwavering investing, Steve is still holding on to a slight lead. He's sitting on $290,000 in purely liquid financial assets.
And now, the climax. We have reached year 20. Both men are 52 years old. 2 full decades of financial choices, compounding returns, and creeping lifestyle costs are finally peaking. Let's look at the final score.
We'll check on Steve first. Thanks to 20 years of compounding at an average 10% return, his portfolio has exploded. It is now a staggering $750,000. That original $80,000 nest egg really did the heavy lifting, supercharged by all that extra cash he invested in those early years when renting was so much cheaper.
So, let's look at the ultimate side-by-side. Ryan did incredibly well, sitting on up to $666,000 in home equity. But on pure net worth, Steve the renter actually comes out ahead. This mathematically shatters the whole myth that renting is just throwing your money away. But, and this is a massive but, it only works if you do something highly productive with the cash you save.
And Steve's victory comes with a pretty massive catch. His rent, after 20 years of steady, relentless increases, is now $3,600 a month. And there is no finish line. He's going to be paying that forever. Ryan, meanwhile, he is just 10 years away from paying off his mortgage entirely and watching his biggest monthly expense just vanish.
We also absolutely have to factor in the liquidity trade-off. There's a great saying for this. Ryan cannot sell 8% of his kitchen. If Steve suddenly needs 20 grand for an emergency, he just clicks a button on his phone and sells some shares. Ryan's wealth is literally trapped in drywall and roof shingles. To access his money, he either has to take on more debt or sell the entire property.
And there are some other hidden trade-offs too. Ryan has massive concentration risk. His entire net worth is basically tied to one street in one specific city. But Ryan has one phenomenal behavioral advantage on his side: forced savings. You see, these spreadsheets assume Steve had flawless discipline, investing every single month for 20 years without fail. For Ryan, the bank acted as a ruthless savings account, basically forcing him to build equity every 30 days. Behaviorally, that is an incredible advantage.
So if you're trying to make this choice for your own life, a great mathematical shortcut you can use is the price-to-rent ratio. It's super simple. Just divide the home price by the annual rent of a comparable property. In our example, it was 14.6. Generally speaking, once that ratio starts climbing up toward 20 or higher, renting becomes mathematically far more competitive.
So, what's the final verdict here? Well, the winner isn't always the homeowner, and it certainly isn't always the renter. Buying usually wins if you plan to stay put for 7 to 10 years so you can absorb those heavy transaction costs. Renting wins if you really value flexibility and you live in a super high-priced local market. But make no mistake, both paths demand intense, long-term financial discipline.
If you do decide to rent for the flexibility and you successfully dodge those closing costs and unpredictable maintenance fees, you really have to look in the mirror and ask yourself the most brutal, honest question of all. Are you genuinely going to invest the difference, or are you just going to spend it? Because if you spend it, that renter's advantage vanishes completely. So, what kind of discipline do you really have?